What is going on, everybody, and welcome back to Salty Runback, here to be your weekly intake of North American Developmental League of Legends. Another week has come and gone. We have gone through 2 weeks of the NACL, which is now technically halfway through that regular season, and the Aegis Champions League has also begun. We've got roster changes, we've got collegiate news, a lot of stuff to bring up here in this new episode of SR. My name is Grapes, joined alongside Hawk. Hawk, how are you doing today?
Grapes are doing pretty well. Yeah, we're 44% of the way through the season. You know, we'll have a super week in week 4. I'll be on that Wednesday, so make sure you watch then. But we still got another week to go before we get there. 5 more games, and honestly, a playoff picture may be kind of already starting to shake out in the NACL. Arguably, I mean, look, 8 teams are going to make it, and I feel like we can be pretty confident in a lot of our predictions. But we'll get into all that soon. Make sure everyone out there, you check out all of our social media and join the Discord. It's been bumping, especially now that ACL's starting up. We got an ACL talk channel in there. It's brand new, well, newish, and you know, come talk about ACL as well as NACL. And I feel like we need to make the names of these 2 leagues different.
They do share, like, well, for ACL's case, 100% of the same letters, so it makes it easy in terms of like knowing that there's things to talk about, or you can always use the same like letters in your speech, I guess. Like, you don't have to like say different ones if that helps you at all. But I guess just without one extra letter, it's just the level right below NACL, I guess, is the way to talk about it. So yeah, they kicked off their first week of games. We're gonna, you know, dive into that a little bit. Both of us, Hawk and I, were on the seating committee, so just some roster discussions there as well. Some pretty fun teams that ended up getting through their first week of an expanded GSL format, like we talked about in our last episode. So make sure you like the video, subscribe if you're new, leave a comment about anything really, if you want to just contribute to the discourse or some of the discussion that we are having in our headlines, because, you know, we ask each other questions, answer them back and forth. If you guys have takes about the answers to the questions as well, let us know below in the comment section, or of course in the Discord that Hawk mentioned should be linked down there in the description as well. But without further ado, time to jump into our headlines for this week. We're going to start off not by the games, but also actually the roster moves of the teams that are going to look a little bit different going into week number 3. Now, we mentioned this a couple of weeks ago that as soon as this, you know, season gets underway, things are going to get very chaotic. And with all best of ones in the regular season, after just a few games being played, you might see a little bit of movement. Well, we definitely have seen that here going into week number 3, with teams starting to hit the panic button towards the bottom of the standings. Blue Otter, who, of course, last week brought in Array to fill in for them, now have KryRa as their jungler, again, formerly of that Dark Zero Light team, now finally getting himself another starting spot halfway through the split like he did with CCG a year ago. And Vancouver Impact also adding Shimmer to their active roster. I think Taki mentioned some nerves with the team overall and just wanting a little bit more options with Will and Shimmer now kind of filling those spots. Out of those 2 junglers, Hawk, that have been announced to be a change for this split, which one has the best chance of saving their team and potentially sending them onto a playoff run?
Which, I love this question. Now, I will just start off by saying, little bit of a loaded question, because I think we do have slightly different expectations for the teams as a whole. So might kind of change who we think is going to have a bigger impact. But, you know, but before I get into it, big week for roster changes. We've got these 2. We've got Phymini coming in for Luminosity, which we'll talk about in our 3rd headline. Also, shout out Yayo/Bajani making his LTA debut for Lion. I don't think we need to talk about it more than that, but, like, you know,
one of the craziest names I saw, like, yeah, I could have thought about being announced to the team. Fisher College Bajani/Yayo online.
Yeah.
I guess it makes sense for a number of reasons. I'm very sad that Zamudo's visa situation has not been figured out. Hopefully it's ready for this upcoming week. I actually have no idea what the holdup was there. I know Lion tried very hard to make sure that he'd be ready, but given the Latin American connection, I guess it makes sense. But he got to hand it to him a little bit, and that's fair. You know,
I'd have to imagine for Zamudo, maybe it's an issue with going from like a student visa to a work visa or something, but regardless, yeah, I think, yeah, the LTA stage went about as we expected, but I mean, it was like a last second e-sub, like, it's fine. I think people flaming him are corny for it. but it definitely did go about as expected. That's neither here nor there. I just kind of wanted to like shout out CLOL Hub's top 10
Yeah,
appearing
the
top laner.
circumstances are funny, but again, like I don't think the org or Bej in any way should be getting like any flame for
Yeah,
this. Like
no.
it just is what it is. It had to happen. So
Yeah, exactly. Like just and you know, Bej, just keep your head down, play the games, man. Like it is what it is. But anyway, going on to the question at hand, what was the more important siding between like the intentional roster changes being Blue, KryRa, and Shimmer? Now, one more piece of context as well. Obviously, Blue already made a roster change, as you mentioned, with Array for Aaron. That was sort of like not their choice, right? Aaron sort of choosing to step away for personal reasons. This one was a direct roster move with the intention of elevating the quality of the squad, as was the change for Shimmer and Will. And I say that preface because I think Blue found a big win for themselves here in the roster change department. Look, I still think Low Jazz is a good jungler. I still think he's on that like borderline, like tier 2, tier 2.5. He's come a really long way in the last year or two as a player. And I don't think he did not deserve his spot, but KryRa is that guy, and I think KryRa is the kind of player that can absolutely elevate Blue Otter to a playoff position, because them and like Dorado right now, to me, are the two teams that are sort of like hoping to avoid 9th place. I think KryRa can really elevate Blue past that point, especially for how smart we've seen him be, especially in the early games where Blue has struggled a little bit. So I just think this is a bombshell pickup where Shimmer on the other side of the coin, he is a good player. I don't see him as that much of an upgrade, if really at all, over Will.
Yeah, I was very surprised to see KryRa not on a roster going into 2025 Split 2. For one reason or another, I felt like, you know, he was in some of these tryouts. He was in Korea for the Dark Zero Combine, but just it did not end up on a starting 5 for the upcoming season. But I'm glad that he finally was able to match up with Blue Otter, because as soon as Keel stepped away for whatever personal reasons that he's had, I kind of immediately turned my head towards KryRa being that option, so I was a bit surprised to see that not initially happen. But now, with him and Array slotted in here, I think this can really help this Blue Otter team that obviously has gotten off to a bit of a slow start. They have not been able to fill in the hole that like Music and Levitate left them when they made these roster changes, to fill alongside the initial 3. And to be fair to Blue Otter, they played against Supernova last week. Like that's a first place team. They've had maybe a tougher strength of schedule, all things considered. Even though they did lose a game to Winthrop pretty handily. I still hope I'm still hoping for the best. I should say for this team. They've played LG and Supernova. Hopefully, the road gets a little bit easier for them, and especially now with KryRa on the roster, that should help them out a lot.
I'm curious, Grapes, where you would power rank this Blue Otter team with KryRa. I'm asking this having not really thought about it myself. One thing I will say, too, is KryRa, notorious for playing around mid. I think it's pretty cool for Samikin, who I feel like, again, like it's just been a quiet year for him so far, but maybe a jungler that can really like kind of get him going to that team fight god that we know he could be could really help out.
I think we all had Blue Otter like 9th going into this split. I think with KryRa and Array added to the team, probably brings them up to around that middle of the pack. I wouldn't put them higher than like a Citadel or Winthrop necessarily, even a CCG, but to me they're kind of all in a very similar tier at this point. And meaning that if they do end up playing CCG and Citadel upcoming, which they don't play in this week, both of those matchups will be during the Super Week. I think that those will be close matches. Curious to see though how they look against Conviction and Dark Zero in week 3, as those are tougher opponents by record, obviously best of ones, but maybe a bit more of a test for this new look roster. As for Shimmer, it is funny that these are both like the ex Dark Zero junglers that have stepped in to fill each of these shoes. I think Shimmer was fine. I think that Vancouver Impact just have been a little bit hands-gapped, and I don't know if Shimmer necessarily solves that. So I'm glad that he's getting this opportunity. They have announced that it will be a full 6-man roster. It's not going to be Will Foley moving to the bench, so there could be situations where he comes back, and I'm curious to see what that dynamic looks like overall.
Full 6-man roster with more than likely only 5 games remaining in their season. Yeah, I think you summed it up perfectly. I just don't think Shimmer fixes any of their problems, regardless of how much like better or worse you think he is than Will. Which, like I said, I view these players relatively similarly. Maybe Shimmer's got some of that like young gun upside, but Will's also like he's always improved. So yeah, I don't know. I just don't feel like this really does much for this team. I agree with you. I think their problems are sort of just greater than like any one player. And so like again, I'm really hoping that they can find a win somewhere, because I do think like some of these players like are NACL caliber. It's just like it's sort of the unfortunate circumstance of like, even though these players are NACL caliber, a lot of them are like 10th place NACL caliber, and somebody's gonna come 10th, right? So it's sort of like but you know, if one or multiple of them were like on different rosters, maybe it would look different. It's just a tough position to be in.
Yeah, again, this is a team that earned their spot like very righteously. They played through the promotion tournament, they played through the OQ, absolutely deserve to be here, and I do think that they have the upside to take down one of these teams somewhere down the line. Maybe Shimmer provides a different vibe shift or some different aspect that can maybe help them out with some of that extra experience that he had with a team like Maryville. So hoping that both of these jungler upgrades can help give a little bit of a boost for these teams going for the rest of the regular season. It's funny because it's also MLB trade deadline season right now, which is, my day job. And so that's all I'm just thinking about roster changes and like upgrades right now, kind of like all over the place. But I do think that like, yeah, this is a team like these guys. It's very different because every team kind of is in playoff contention because 8 out of the 10 teams make it. And so if you are kind of on that bubble, making that change now could potentially help you. So definitely like to see it for these guys. But anyway, with that being said, let's move on to the actual gameplay that we have seen on the Rift. 10 more best of ones, obviously, as we've gotten through 2 weeks of the regular season. And with 4 best of ones played for each of these teams, Hawk, I know we've talked about a lot of these teams. Specifically last week, this week, we're going to focus more on the players. Give me one player that has exceeded your expectations so far this season, and one player that we're hoping to see a little bit more from in these next couple of weeks.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fun question, honestly. We do something like this every sort of split. I'll start off with the player. I'll start positive, a player that I've really been impressed by. Is one that I was just really not sure what to expect from, because we've not seen him play this role, and he was so good in his main role through the promotion tournament, coming to a new team, a new role. We kind of had a lot of questions of like, would he be enough to make this team like a true contender, or would they just barely scrape into playoffs? And CCG's looked pretty damn good, and so has Fadachan down there in the bottom lane. Him and Shogo together have been a great bottom lane throughout 2 weeks of competition against some of the best teams we've had in the league. Kind of gapped Instinct and Diamond just last Friday. We also saw them do extremely well against Tactical and Zazel. So, it's been like a little bit up and down, but I think in general, I've just been really impressed by Fadachan, I think largely in part because I just like, I really didn't know what to expect, but he's been a good support in this league.
Definitely. That's not the direction I thought you were going to go, but that's a good one. For Fadachan on CCG, again, we were hoping that we were going to get to see him play bot lane for Dorado because he was so good both in Evo
yeah.
and in NACL qualifiers, like going through the space. But I know that he has kind of been trying out in both roles throughout the year, and so definitely was an option, especially if you wanted to play with somebody like Shogo. Obviously, they lost to Dark Zero Dragonsteel, but then ended up, winning in their next game. So CCG definitely looking like a pretty solid contender there. I had 2 teams or 2 players that I wanted to highlight on the good side. And actually, they both played against each other last week. The bot laners for Winthrop University and Conviction put on a bit of a showcase in our last series. Mobility, I think, has kind of been a player that we've been high on, but maybe just wondering what his peak can be. I feel like he's back to that form that he was on with AoE last summer, that when he was kind of really trying his best to carry those games, or what we saw from him maybe in the NACL playoffs. Even in those games that they ended up losing, or like in their loss yesterday.
He's had 2 really good Jhin losses so far this season.
A total KDA, by the way, of 16.3. He's died 3 times over 4 games with a record of 2-2. That's pretty impressive for an AD carry player. You can argue KDA or whatever, but I do feel like he's been impactful in a lot of their games as well.
He has been.
But not as impactful as Conviction's bot laner in Viper, who you definitely had your doubts about going
I really
into the
did.
start of the
Yeah.
season. I was a little bit more on the fence because I've seen him play like Vayne top and I've seen him play AD carry like on different teams, so maybe he would have been there. I don't think any of us could have expected what he's been able to put out in terms of a performance so far this season in the NACL. It's been pretty incredible. He whipped out the Vayne, went 11-4-3. He plays a seemingly different kind of way on the AD carry. I think Cubby tweeted this out, where it seems like he's playing ADC like a top laner, where he's trying to hand
Yeah.
check people in the 2v2.
I
And the KDAs and the way and the style and like just kind of how he's been able to operate fully do match that description.
I said it on the NACL broadcast on Thursday as well. This is the exact same. Yeah, he plays AD carry like a top laner. He'll go for crazy ass flanks. He dies a lot, but he gets a lot of fucking kills. I think the biggest thing to me that's been impressive about that Conviction bottom lane has just been their laning has been really, really solid. Viper and Stun have not been getting gapped into 2v2, and they've been playing a lot of scaling bottom lanes, like just scaling mid laners and AD carries, trying to get the team fights. TF Blade on the tanks, and it's been working pretty damn well for him. Like parry bridging mid game, like it's a really basic style, but Conviction's been playing it super well. I am glad that you brought up, like, Viper was the other one I want to talk about. I just knew you would bring him up if I didn't, so wanted to give a shout out to Fadachan, but yeah, Viper has been electric. Like, he's been really fun to watch, I think has been most importantly. Like, if you've not been watching Conviction games,
Yeah.
you know, I've already said it, but I'll continue to say it. Like, I'm definitely eating my words. I did not think Conviction would put on a show the way that they have. And I think it's fun that their playstyle has been so unique, so electric to watch, because they play scaling, but y'all, their games are not sleepers. Let me tell you, they would take the hands checks all day, every day. Just to give a couple of other shout outs as well of players that have been like really good. Hoarder and Dardoch, the top side for Supernova has been disgusting. I think Hoarder, you know, we had questions of like how well would he slot him with the veterans. He's been pretty damn good. Dardoch looking like maybe the best jungler in the league. Kizno's giving him a run for his money. But Dardoch's undefeated, so that counts for something. We've also got like, I don't know, like Young and Shochi, they've made their returns and they've looked pretty decent in their games back, which I think is good to see. Just a couple of other names to shout out there.
Yeah, maybe not a big surprise, but hey, Scary Jerry is actually still pretty good in the league. He had a fantastic week as well, so I think we'd be a little bit doing him wrong if we did not get a chance to shout him out with Supernova, who's currently 4-0 in the standings. Get to the more negative side, though, Hawk. I mean, I can go first if you want. Just in terms of a player that we want to maybe see a little bit more from, hate to say it, but Samikin has not looked like the Samikin that we have wanted to see throughout these first 2 weeks. I think some of it maybe can be attributed to the roster disarray and just all of the like kind of extenuating circumstances. But outside of that first game against Vancouver Impact, it has not been super smooth sailing for our Blue Otter mid laner. Has a lot of chances to continue to step up. Again, as we mentioned, hopefully KryRa can try to reinvigorate this team. Array slotting in for another full week hopefully can help him out. But yeah, we are so excited about Samikin. I mean, he's friend of the show, obviously. Would love to see him like really put up some big numbers over these next couple weeks.
Yeah, it's just been a tough year for Sammy. I mean, laning has always been like a thing, you know, and he's gotten a lot better at it, but I do still just feel like he's been struggling to be relevant enough in the games early enough. Like, he doesn't need to gap people. He's not getting gapped either, but I just feel like a lot of the time he's not linking up to make plays with whoever his jungler is and really making an impact. So it's been a little tough. Definitely hoping to see that resurgence. Like, I would like to see Blue Water just be more successful at slowing the game down. I think that's something that they did so well back in that 2023 summer split. And also, you know, 2024 summer split, and also in the spring when they promoted. Like, I think, you know, if they can get to the team fights and let him be a hero, that's where he shines. It just feels like they've struggled to do that. You know, meta hasn't really lent itself to it, but yeah, I think it's been a little tough. My shout out is also going to be actually for a Conviction player. I will say, Conviction's been pretty electric. TF Blade has absolutely been getting a backpack for 4 straight games. Like, I'm going to be so honest. He's mostly been playing tank, so I get that it's like part of the job. I've just not felt like he really does much in their games. Maybe that's just because Viper is going like so sicko mode. Like it's hard to notice him. But like, I mean, I think Perry, Evolved, and Stunt have all been making their presences felt. Like I really do just have felt like Blade is kind of showing up to team fights, losing his lanes a little bit. You know, again, he's not exactly getting resources. It's definitely not all on him. But I feel like when we heard of Blade coming into this league, we were kind of expecting like some sort of side lane carry, and I don't know. I just like I think if we phrase the headline as not impressed, I think that's exactly it. Like he's not playing bad. I'm just not impressed. I would like to see more, and I do think that's gonna be the biggest piece in Conviction elevating themselves to like a top tier team.
Yeah, one of my favorite parts of New Airport was just watching TF Blade kind of style on people in side lanes, or try to flip these games on like Nidalee top lanes, Garen's, you know, random things like that. Haven't seen that as much so far, which honestly is maybe a good thing for this team, given how volatile the rest of the map also has been playing. Sometimes having a stable presence up in the top side can help in a way. And you know, maybe it's a sign of some growth and some willingness for TF Blade to play a little bit more for the team for this split, which would be, you know, pretty cool to see. Obviously, like, you know, you think of somebody like Denethor even, who came up as like a Camille player, but then was able to like kind of learn how to play the Sion Sejuanis and things like that. I feel like maybe a similar situation here for TF Blade, and I don't know how much he wants to, you know, take this competitive journey for him, but right now I feel like he's pretty okay weak siding. But yes, agreed. I honestly kind of forgot that he was on this team, so
I just like I feel like he's been. I just don't think he's like a weak side goat yet. You know what I mean? He's learning the weak side, but he's like, I don't know, like losing a lot of resources. I feel like usually there's like a pressure vacuum on the top side for Conviction. Like, you know, a lot really good weak side top laners can still generate pressure when they need to, and so it's just like, that's the next step in the growth. I think is just like where he needs to get to.
Yeah. Hey, hoping the best for those guys as well, and still a lot of season, over half of the regular season technically, to try and fix some of those narratives for one way or the other. And yeah, still a lot of League of Legends to be played here in the NACL. Last thing, NACL-wise, before we move on to further topics, is another change that is maybe a bit more on the temporary side. As Phymini actually had to sub in for Luminosity for this past week. Insanity not available, and I think the general consensus is that he'll be around eventually, you know, to finish off the split. But for now, it is Phymini going forward. They went 1-1 on the split, or on the week, I should say, after having, you know, a relatively challenging schedule. So I guess the question is, Hawk, with Phymini on this team, is this Luminosity squad still a favorite to make it to the promotion tournament?
It's a tough question. And now, just to, you know, kind of quell any alarm bells, Phymini, or Insanity is not gone. He's not kicked from the team or anything. He's just sort of, he's out indefinitely for you know, their own reasons. So, like, it's not like Phi's in. He's their ride or die. Like, Insanity may or may not be back at some point. But Phymini's sort of playing, and it's a fun thought experiment. And are they a favorite for promotion? So interesting. They are 2-2 right now after having played all the other best teams. 2 of those games they played with Insanity. 2 of them they played with Phymini. Phymini got the hardest games. Kind of got plowed by Ablaze Olive and the rest of Supernova. Like, a little bit. Dardoch found some really good catches onto him that made the game a little bit difficult for Luminosity. But he turns it around and played really well against Dark Zero. So I think the answer is no, just because I've not been impressed with the rest of Luminosity over the course of this split so far. Okay. And I think Phymini's not the guy that is like going to save them. And so that's sort of where I'm at with that. I think like LG to me with Insanity is like still a favorite, but not as overwhelming as we thought coming into the split. And now with Phymini, it just adds this extra layer of variance that, no, I don't really have them as a favorite. I do still think they are a lock to be at worst top 4 or 5 in this league, though.
It's really easy to, I guess, be a team that, or sorry, be a player that, like plays one split, gets demoted, and then people kind of forget about you. Let's not forget about Phymini. This guy is very young, kind of rising up very quickly through the space, finished top 2 in that Aegis team with the Maryville boys. So proving that he's been able and capable of working with, you know, potentially some more veterans and being kind of a face in that own way. And I think actually, like, when AMI were playing in that promotion tournament, Phymini was actually really stepping up and looking maybe the best we've seen from him ever, if not just like throughout all year. And so when, you know, LG had to deal with something like this, I'm glad that Phi got the call. I'm glad that he has been able to perform. I honestly thought he outplayed Toasty in that game that they played against Dark Zero. So, yeah, I'm really excited for the future of this guy. Will it be enough to turn them into favorites if he does have to stick around for the rest of the split? Maybe not. But, you know, with Dark Zero kind of underperforming a little bit to start off the split as well, there really isn't that like clear consensus number 2 team at this point, even with, you know, LG kind of a little bit down in the dumps. So, or maybe just undermanned at this point is maybe the better word to put here. So, honestly, still probably the number 2 team if I had to rank them right now, even over Dark Zero just because of the head-to-head.
I mean, that's fair. I don't think that's a bad take. We'll really get to find out. You know, Dark Zero starting their split, their week, against Supernova. That's going to be another really big match. Supernova sort of running the gauntlet as well of the top teams. You know, kind of all playing each other in these couple weeks. But to me, I feel like the only team that I view as like a favorite for promotion is Supernova. I think for both Dark Zero and Luminosity, to your point, I honestly don't view either of them as favorites for promotion because I feel like they both have not done enough to separate each other from themselves, and they've not done enough to separate themselves from the pack for me. I mean, I know Dark Zero is 3-1. They've only lost to LG, but I still don't view them as that much better than like some of the teams that are nipping at their heels, despite some of those head-to-head wins. So, yeah, I think maybe that's my take, and that's sort of where I'm coming from on this issue. Now, how much weaker, if at all, do you think Luminosity is with Phymini compared to with Insanity?
Oh, definitely weaker. I think Insanity was one of the best players in the league last split, obviously. So not having him there is going to be, you know, a bit of a hurt. But for now, I don't think anybody else really in the rest of the league has stepped up and looked like that, like full contender other than them. So that is why, in my opinion, like LG still, with the track record and with the other players that they have, no longer the favorites, like the consensus number 1 that we put them at, especially if Insanity is not able to, you know, come back for the foreseeable future. But definitely a team that, for me, is still like in that contention, maybe even the favorites. So, you know, all that being said, there's a chance, like, tomorrow when the games start, like, Insanity's back in there. Like, I actually have no idea. Maybe you have some more intel that you don't have.
No, I don't either. I mean, literally, like, we were starting to talk about the like, it's like, all right, let's bring up the rosters for Luminosity versus, I don't remember who they're playing. Supernova. And we're like, and Phymini isn't. So, yeah, we'll find out, I guess, on Thursday.
Cool. Well, we'll figure it out. Hey, you know, maybe this conversation all out the window, other than the fact that, hey, shout out to Phymini. This guy is very good.
I mean, he is talented. He's a good player.
Yes, for the time being, in terms of being on an NACL roster. But speaking of NACL, let's get rid of one of those letters and move on to the ACL, as we are going to be now discussing that league a little bit more. They just concluded their first season, or their first week of play, I should say, in the GSL stage of their season. 2 best-of-3s played by some teams. Each, you know, some teams also played one. It was like the top seeded teams got a bye to start things off. And speaking of seeding, Hawk, we ended up being a part of that committee. And 3 of the 10 NACL teams, CCG, the Citadel, and Supernova, our first place team, all competing here in the Aegis Champions League. All 3 of them going 2-0 through their bracket series and scores-wise, and then moving into that one final decider that shall be happening next Monday to determine who gets that top seed going into the next stage of the event. With that being said, there are also a lot of teams here that are going to make things pretty competitive against some of these NACL teams. Who will be the first team to beat an NACL team, not in a game, but in a best-of-3 or 5 series?
Yeah, now there's a lot of other great, you know, NACL players playing in this league as well. The obvious pick off the bat is Papa's Chonks, which is sort of like Winthrop light, which has Denethor, what's his Wilson? God, I was gonna read his IGN here, but he's moved on from that one. Denethor, Wilson, and only 35, all from Winthrop. We have Aaron, Chrome playing with them, and then we also have Papa in at the mid lane, the artist formerly known as Conveying. So, I mean, that is definitely like a mostly NACL caliber team. Conveying also a really solid player in his own right. That's sort of an obvious pick off the bat of a team that I feel like can definitely be competitive. We've also got Gravity, who, you know, a little bit, in my opinion, maybe a little bit underseeded compared to some other folks. Fiji, Wenwin, Asila, Ajosu, and Redemption. They just took down a team with a lot of NACL players on it. Top side may be a little questionable of Manui Draxer, but then speaking of Phymini in the mid lane, Levitate and Cryogen, which I think most people would have as like a top half of the NACL mid bottom lane trio.
Yeah, 2-0ing them actually is Gravity. Shout out to Ajosu, pretty cool clip that went out across the waves that resulted in Gravity 2-0ing that series. They're playing actually against CCG on Monday, so if you're looking for, you know, just like the quickest opportunity to face off at a best of 3 series, that is it. Gravity against CCG. You also have Apex Mission Impossible, which is slightly different going into this season. They still have Decoy, they still have Baz, but it is BB, who was a player that Pocus actually played with back in the day, Retrovzing, and Proto as the support. Pocus actually listed as a sub slash coach for this team at this point, but they are playing against the Citadel in that upper bracket as well. As for the Papa's Chunks team that you brought up, actually don't have one of those NACL teams in their group. Supernova will be playing up against Cupid in that big winners finals game, which is the entirety of Pulsar from last split, kind of reformed on a different organization. I think all 3 of the NACL teams are favored to win those games specifically. I might just have to give it to Papa's Chunks, even though they don't have anybody else in their group, just because of, I feel like they are the team that probably has the best chance of maybe matching up with them. 2 other candidates I want to throw out there are Komodo, Alorum, Colthrow, Doxa, Azog, and Pika Pika. A bit of, you know, the boomer squad at this point, but, you know, always fun to see Komodo back in the league. They are generally a fun team to watch. And then Lotus, which has Porsche, Chad, Jungle, Robbie Bob, Clarice at support. And then they have Reptile, the guy from EU. I think he's playing literally on like 120 ping in ACL, which is hilarious. But that's actually another team that I'm pretty excited to watch.
This Lotus team is definitely funny. I'm gonna be honest. I don't think I'm like not sure. I believe that Lotus has the sauce to take down the boys. Also, Komodo, you mentioned them. They did get taken down by AMI, which I think is definitely an upset for Apex Mission Impossible. So shout out to that team for getting it done. I think 2 solid teams though for sure. Both Komodo and AMI. One more shout out I want to give is that the undefeated in NACL unanimous best team in the league, Supernova, did drop a singular game to Weber State University. Now that they have an actual support, Sandillion, I believe, back in at 80 carry with Mystiques as their new support. Otherwise, the roster exactly the same as it was this previous year.
Oh, no, they have Batao.
That's pretty fucking hype.
Weber have Batao now in the top lane as well, so no more Jax up there.
Oh, you're right. Sorry, yeah, Batao was on OC. So yeah, okay, a few upgrades coming in for Weber State. I don't know, man. We already knew that U13 and Goku were like fucking like that, but apparently with Batao and Sendy playing his main role in Mystiques, this team is pretty scary. I don't know.
Yeah, taking a game off Supernova. I mean, that's what Weber did all year, right? Was just like pull off these crazy upsets. I hope we get to continue to see that going into the rest of 2025 for ACL at the very least, and you know, potentially a preview of what their CLOL team could look like going into next season. Unfortunately, though, we won't be able to see them at one of the big premier tournaments in the fall that has been happening for years as we move on to our final headline. HUEFest, to give a big salute to them as they unfortunately announced that they will be not conducting operations for 2025. Perhaps writing on the wall a little bit after the Harrisburg League of Legends team was disbanded after, I believe, 2023. And just in general, Hue was one of the premier collegiate lands for so many years. I remember when I first got into league casting, first got into college, one of the first events that I did watch was HUEFest. It was all online at that point, but I think like Captain Flowers was casting it. And of course, it's gotten to a point where, a lot of collegiate teams would come, and that would be the big thing for them in the fall. But now the landscape hawk of collegiate was always, spring is for CLOL, fall is for these lands. But now the lands that we have come up and learned to love, whether it was 66 Invitational or HUEFest or whatever other events were out there, kind of don't exist anymore in that certain capacity. So with that being said, I guess the question is, are we worried about the future of, fall League of Legends? And in a scenario that HUEFest no longer exists, should College League of Legends now just become a one semester thing? Should we not even care about the fall season anymore? Should we just make sure we are only focused on one semester to make that the best as possible?
Yeah, it's a tough question. Oh, excuse me, I've been very yawny for this episode. Okay, lock in. It's a tough question. I will say, like, as far as HUEFest specifically, definitely sucks to see it go. It's been kind of. I never even like had a personal connection to HUEFest, but seeing all like the collegiate players like post their memories on Twitter and stuff was pretty nice to see this past week. And I think the writing was on the wall for Hue. Like, they didn't have League of Legends last year. I think the Lamb was kind of already on its last legs. So not really surprised to see it go, but definitely still a bummer nonetheless. I think already CLOL has sort of been considered of like this 1.5 semester commitment, in the sense of like, spring is the big kahuna. That's when CLOL is. That's what everyone's competing for. That's what everyone wants. And then like there's these tournaments happening in the fall where, you can keep the axe sharp, or, go to a LAN or something like that. I think, some programs took that seriously, some didn't. I think I'm very okay with that being the case. I think the bigger problem now is that one of the big draws was to like, go to a LAN and experience that, and to like really, I think, have like, not for fun tournaments, because they were important, but like have self-important tournaments, something that has value other than like the trophy that everyone's chasing at the end. Like, that's what CLOL is, and that's what CLOL should always be. But I don't think anyone really gives a damn about fall warm-up, and then so there, to me, there's nothing really now to fill that void. And I would still like to see some sort of like intrinsically important competition happen in the fall that like a smaller number of teams could compete in, should they have the drive to do so. And kind of making it like an optional thing. I think that is still valuable, because that also would bring value to collegiate League of Legends as a whole. And, again, rising tides raise all ships. A strong fall tournament incentivizes strong programs year round. It keeps the kids in the schools, all this and that. The colleges like it because they get more to advertise. Like, there you go. So,
yeah, I love that we got to use the fall tournaments as just a way to get CLOL involved, kick off the year, get people excited about what the season was to come, and also get a chance to kind of preview some of the rosters, and maybe even for teams to like test out some of their roster decisions as well. Obviously, always there are changes made between semesters, but I remember back to 66 in 2023 when we were watching like Strumpus, or Doxa, I should say, like playing top lane against Spirax, and like trying to figure out like what's the best solution here for Maryville, for Slew, like and what are pieces that they can use moving forward. And obviously that turned into one of the most exciting collegiate seasons that we had ever had in 2024. So hoping that there is some way to get a fall season involved still. I obviously think that, spring should and will continue to be the priority. Most other traditional college sports do only run for one season, but they have other stuff that they do in terms of training and practice during the off seasons. Maybe you consider that NACL, maybe you consider that something else, but I think just the way the esports functions, like having something in the fall, maybe it doesn't have to last the entirety of the semester, for maybe just like a week or two, to get people involved, get people excited, could be cool. Whether it's online or in person. I know LANs are very expensive to run these days, and
yeah.
are a very big hassle in terms of travel and getting everybody involved. But perhaps there is a way to upgrade what is currently on the table from GG Tech in terms of the fall CLOL season. Fall warm-up right now doesn't feel like it's the right solution.
I completely agree with you. I think that's the problem that somebody needs to solve. Is I do think LANs are for as great as they are somewhat impractical, and there are really real concerns with that, because especially now that we're sort of seeing the death of the varsity program, you know, club teams, it's really difficult for them, I think, to like come and play at a LAN during the school year, but just in general. So how can someone come up with a tournament that still holds its own importance that isn't a LAN? That's the question that I think is being asked right now. And whether or not it's possible, honestly, I think is a question. But I think, you know, maybe if it could be ruminated on, maybe there's a solution to that problem. Because I agree. Like, I think there is space for an online tournament that is intrinsically valuable. But
yeah,
I don't really know what the answer is right now. But it's just like, that's the question.
I think the problem with warm-up is that there's not enough, like, divisions, right? Like,
yes.
It's too quick of a format.
There needs to be like there needs to be like the LAN format for, like, you know, 8 to 12 teams, but in a fall warm-up-y package.
Yeah, maybe there's an angle there for an entertaining product. Again, it also has to come down to the fact that, like, will there be full rosters, like, formed and ready to go, ready to operate, wanting to play in the fall? I would hope so, and I, you know, maybe that is something that people could look into for the upcoming season. As you know, CLOL continues to be super exciting. It's something that we really love to follow here on Salty Runback, and would love to get another tournament to kind of cover all that. So yeah, wishing the best here for Hugh, wishing the best for all of our CLOL programs as they navigate the offseason, trying to figure out what their plans are for 2026, which again should be another exciting year. But speaking of 2025, the NACL is still going on as we speak. As this episode comes out, the league games will be starting once again in just a couple of hours. So make sure you tune into that. Check all of those games out. And hey, we'll probably have another part 2 out maybe tomorrow. I'm not entirely sure what that's going to look like, but I think we're going to do something to make sure we get our two episode quota in.
Yeah, we're cooking, maybe. Hopefully we are cooking. But make sure you follow us on all of our social media at Salty Runback NA and at Hawkcast at Speedy Grapes to make sure you're up to date on everything Salty Runback. Also, join the Discord. It's a pretty cool place to be. There's a lot of really cool people. You know, everyone was glazing Yanni yesterday for a pretty sick caster call that he had on ACL. Deservedly so. It was a pretty good one.
Hell yeah.
And so, like, you know, if you want to be a part of fun times like that, supporting other creators in the space, players in the space, you know, talking to coaches, all that, it's all in the Discord. My light's plugged in, so I don't know why it turned itself off. But if you think that college fall League of Legends is dumb, take what we said with a grain of salt. Why are you even here? We like collegiate League of Legends. Get out of here. I've been Hawk. That's been Grapes. Have a good night, y'all.